It's streamlined, and to me, it's just simpler to understand.
So your mic sounded better than mine. And I think the main substantive change on that one is the change from having the 2 years terms to the 1 year term. And so each year you would have the election of officers based on the proposed policy or proposed changes.
For 1 year.
I do, Mr. Murdock, I do have two quick questions. I think the first one probably is more to Mr. Verney. When it says, and will be elected annually, that the first line that's underlined, will be elected annually during the board's organizational meeting in November. When we came on board last November, I know there was some question of when the meeting could be, because we have to wait so long in order for the elections to be certified. And I know we vote on our meetings a year in advance, so I didn't know if maybe there was some way, if if our November meeting had already been approved for a date that was before that deadline for certification, then technically we wouldn't be able to vote on those officers. Do you see what I'm saying?
Correct. I mean, so the option would be to either have another meeting or just to reschedule the November meeting at a point past when the election is certified.
Okay, so we wouldn't need to just clarify anything in that policy. We just leave it as is, and then we address that as need be.
Correct.
Okay.
I still don't agree with changing the election of officers from January to November. I don't see the need. I really don't. I've been looking at it. We've been managing before.
Well, so just for instance, Mr. Murdock, if this November was next November and the 4 odd seats were up for election, there would be a possibility that our chair and our vice chair could both not be elected. So then you would have November and the December meeting where we didn't have a chair or a vice chair present.
We'll still have board members on the board that can serve as chair and vice chair at that time. I just don't see the need. I'm just saying I can't support that.
So if we decide, okay, they have November, but if the election and everything is not validated, should we wait until December? I mean, I understand from both perspectives as of why and why not.
Yeah, I don't know people that wait till December, but I have seen people adjust the timing of the November meeting and so that it's after the results of the election are certified.
Okay.
So moving it back a week or whatever is necessary to wait until the results are certified.
Okay.
And then just my other question, according to this, the board will elect a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. I don't know, Mr. Verney, maybe you can just kind of give me some insight. To me, it seems like, and again, this is just my opinion, it would be very difficult for a board member to be the secretary and be taking minutes and notes and still be involved in the conversation and the discussion that would be going on for me. You know, if something happened and I was voted to be secretary and I was supposed to keep up with all the minutes of the meeting, it would be very hard for me then to also be involved in the discussion.
And I would say the secretary, in the way it's used in terms of board officer, is not the person that ultimately is taking the minutes. Typically, boards actually employ or have a staff person who's actually taking the minutes.
Okay, well, and so my confusion was that last line that's been stricken out that says the district superintendent would serve as ex officio secretary. With that being taken out, I thought that then put that onus on that board secretary.
It's everybody I know actually has someone that they pay to actually take the minutes and not an actual member of the board.
I got you.
So then who would that secretary that's there that says the officers will consist of the chair, vice chair, and a secretary? So Who would that secretary be? Isn't the secretary the?
Yes.
Well, no,
Okay.
there's a board
Another
secretary, but
secretary.
there's also a secretary that actually is more the practical secretary who's actually taking the minutes of the meetings and that sort of thing.
And that's why in the past I had brought before the board to hire like a part-time secretary coming in for, I mean, if there is a secretary within the district who is willing to do so, then those options are available before we go outward looking. But if, because you look at the secretary to the superintendent, has a lot going on, very busy, and if that person cannot fulfill the responsibility, then that's why when I came to the board and asked to hire a part-time, then, you know, that availability will be there.
So, Mr. Verney, again, I don't want to belabor this point at all, but can you just give me some idea, is the board secretary that's elected, is that more of just a title, or are there actually responsibilities for that
I'd say
person?
it's more ceremonial.
Okay.
And for example, sometimes when something happens in the vice chair, so sometimes you might have an issue where they're sort of serving in the absence of another officer.
got you.
But for the most part, it's mostly ceremonial.
Thank you.
All hearts are clear?
I believe you. I think so. I mean, do you want to add anything too?
Moving right along.
Okay.
Policy DK, expense authorization reimbursement.
Well, I can address some of the questions that are being asked of me in this, basically talking about how district employees will be reimbursed, and also board members if you choose to add that in there as well. But yes, to answer that question after that very first paragraph, yes, the district does use these particular procedures to reimburse employees for approved travel. We do have a prior approval form that staff members are asked to fill out, and then it goes through the procedures, and then it's approved by the superintendent. The out-of-district travel reimbursement form, we utilize that as well. That third paragraph that asks, is this preferred instead of approving up to 75% advance funding? Personally, I would suggest that we prepay hotel reservations after the prior approval has gone through the approval process. I would rather prepay for hotels, for plane, train reservations, registration, all of that, instead of approving the 75% advance funding. It just makes it easier and it's more streamlined to me.
And the only thing I was going to add to that is then you also have a cover, because sometimes the fear with the prepaying is the cancellation, particularly if it's a situation where you can't get your deposit back. But there is language that says if necessary, the employee or board member may be responsible for reimbursing the district for monies not refundable. And obviously that would depend on the circumstances that led to the cancellation.
Right.
So, Mr. Verney, just from a legal, technical sense, that last line that we were just talking about, if cancellations are necessary, may be responsible for reimbursing,
So.
that seems rather vague. So my concern is at this last conference that we had a board member who had reservations to go, and a family member had a medical emergency the night of. So how can, in the language that says may be responsible for reimbursing, how can we ensure that in a situation like that, that board member would be covered and would not be asked to reimburse those?
Yeah, I think it's just a judgment thing, and I think we're leaving it with some wiggle room for that, to cover that type scenario. So obviously, if it's a medical reason, death in the family, I would think any reasonable person would understand, it's a legitimate reason as opposed to, oh, I just changed my mind and I decided I didn't want to go.
Want to go,
Right,
you know,
right.
because I
Ed,
have something else.
Who would be ultimately responsible for that decision, Mr. Bernie?
Well, it probably would start at the superintendent, but then if somebody had a disagreement with it, they could appeal it to the.
So there would be an appeal process?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Are we going to include that language in there, or we just kind of like take it in consideration of each case?
We were recommending including that language in there
Okay.
with the understanding that you had, there's a little bit of judgment involved in making the decision about that.
Okay.
Yes.
Would a board member, would that happen to go to the superintendent, or would it come to the board chair for discussion and vote?
Probably if the person withdraws as a board member, it'd be cleaner if the board, you probably don't want to put your superintendent in a situation where they're having to make a decision about a board member.
Yeah,
So I would say the board would need to decide that.
All right.
So everyone is clear with this one?
ARDKCR, expense authorization reimbursement for mileage.
And I know from our perspective, I think the concern last time was trying to set it up where, to the extent possible, you could cut costs as far as with travel and lodging. And so talking about carpooling and those kind of things, we sort of put some draft language in there to address those concerns from the board at the last meeting.
I think that I understand what we're trying to accomplish here, but with COVID back on the rise, there may be some different setup for any conferences and stuff that we're having. So we just have to be open towards all of that is coming forward as well.
Yeah, and I think that the language that's there, I like the way it says that they are encouraged,
Okay.
but it's not required.
Okay.
And I personally agree with you. I don't think that staff should be required to lodge with others, just for personal reasons. People may have personal reasons, they may have religious reasons, different things. So I think the language that says encouraged should be there, and then, as we approve them, then we'll go from there.
I totally agree.
Yep.
Because, I mean, just speaking with a couple that I had to do a physical on, she told me, she said her marriage would have probably been over if they didn't have CPAP machine, because her snoring, she almost got kicked out. So, I mean, everyone have different options and different situations, so I totally agree.
And the same for the travel as well. It says, employees attending the same conference, workshop, or meeting are encouraged to travel by group when possible. I think leaving it that way just gives us some room. If there is a possibility for staff members to travel together, of course, we're going to encourage that because it saves the district money. But I would, like to have that flexibility for various reasons. You have people that live out of town, just all kinds of different reasons why sometimes staff members may not be able to travel together. I also wanted to just kind of propose that on page 3 of that particular policy at the top, where it says any difference between a double room and a single room will not be reimbursed or paid by the district when a spouse accompanies an employee on a trip. I just think double room, single room needs to be clarified, because are we talking double beds? Are we talking a double room where you have two rooms, yeah, like a suite. I just think it needs to be clarified. And then something else that I brought to Vernie's attention was sometimes a single room or a single bed can cost less than double, or vice versa. Yeah, yeah, the double can cost less than a king. So I just think we need to just clarify that sentence there a little bit more.
Do they actually charge when a spouse go with you? Do they actually charge for that room, double? Do anyone know?
I don't think
No.
they do, because normally when I'm going, you would ask me which, what would I like to have, and I would say the less expensive one. So, I mean,
The room rate is the room rate.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think the concern is like when you get a larger room or like add a suite because family members are traveling with you. And so making the person responsible for the difference. But I agree with Jessica, we just want to make sure that that's clear, that that's what we're trying, that's the
Yes.
concern we're trying to address.
Clarity.
yeah, I think, yeah, that language needs to change.
I think Dr. Bannock had a-
Yeah.
That's true.
Right.
Correct. And
She might.
Can you
need-
get a mic?
Yeah, you might need a mic because of the rain.
when we are making reservations, oftentimes because of our prior approval process, we run into the rooms at that's hosting the event not being available. And then we are incurring additional expenses, and it doesn't really have to do with a spouse or not. So when you're saying reimburse the difference between, then we run into the problem about the venue that's hosting versus the venue that we have to go down the street and get that won't honor the same.
Right.
So that's something that's also important as employees when we are making travel arrangements. You're talking about reimbursing between if you carry a spouse, but as long as it's not reimbursement if there's a price difference between the hosting hotel and where we end up staying. So
Right.
Point that out.
Completely
Because
understand.
That's
Yes.
been mentioned also.
Yes. And then, in that instance, Ms. McDonald, I think that, sometimes we have no control over that because that's happened to me as well. I think when I went to the superintendent symposium, the room block was sold out. So I had to get a room in another hotel. And I think it costs just a little bit more. But sometimes those things are unforeseeable. But I think what this policy is trying to convey is like, say for instance, when we go to SCAZA in the summertime and you get a one bedroom. One bedroom is for your one person's. But if you bring guests, spouse, guests, and you go to a two bedroom, then you need to pay the difference between that one bedroom and that two bedroom.
Because I remember going to Myrtle Beach and they were out of rooms and they gave me a suite and I didn't know until I got there. So my response was, I don't mind getting the suite, it's just that I'm not going to pay for it. And neither will the district. And he was like, no, you will get the regular price.
How about travel from that hotel away from the meeting to the hotel away the meeting? Are we gonna compensate the employees for that? I mean, I've never got travel.
Yeah,
All-
if you claim that on your reimbursement form, then yes, you would get reimbursed for that. But some people just, they don't claim all of that, but you can because it's travel that you incurred while you were at the conference.
But
Mr. Murdock, this policy specifically says only travel directly to and from a conference, workshop, or meeting is reimbursable. So if you decide in a break in the conference to go out shopping, that mileage is not reimbursable.
No, I'm
that's
talking
not.
about if you was at another hotel and you got to get to the meeting, that's what I'm talking about. You have to, okay. Because I don't never try to travel. Day from home to, I never have. Have I? No meals.
So we're just gonna add those language too?
Changing that to guest.
And then clarification on the rooms?
Okay.
Okay, policy GC, professional staff.
Yeah, I think the main thing here is just taking out a lot of that language and just clarifying that when you talk about, when you're saying professional staff, you're talking about certified staff, folks whose positions require a teaching certificate by the state. And so the details are addressed in a lot of other policies, but just having this policy clearly reflect who is considered a professional staff as compared to support or classified employees.
So my question on this policy and the GCA subsection policy is, I think one of the recent areas where we ran into an issue was with hiring positions on the organizational chart, right? And so how does this clear up that so we understand which positions do require board approval and which positions do not require board approval? Because there were positions on the organizational chart, I think, that did not fall under this definition of professional staff because they were not certified, but yet the board was expected to vote on them, but then there were other positions that were filled without the board's approval.
I think there were some instances where we had employees that were certified, but they were serving in a position that was a non-certified position. So there was a discrepancy about, does the board have to approve or disapprove?
Right.
Yeah, I think that was the issue. Even though they were certified, they were serving in a non-certified position. So I don't know if you could provide some clarity to that. Do you understand what I'm saying? So like on the organizational chart, there could have been someone on the administrative cabinet who was serving in a non-certified position, but they are a certified employee. So does the board need to approve their hire?
I'd say the safest course would be would be yes.
Yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
How about an employee that resigned and you hire somebody in that position after the fact?
I would say it would depend on what the position was. I mean, but if it's one of these positions involving a certified employee, I would say the board would need to approve it.
So again, I'm not trying to be technical or anything, but I just heard our attorney say if it's on the organizational chart, safest thing would be for the board to approve it. 2 years from now, whenever we have this situation arise and that is not written in policy, how do we make sure that that same standard is still upheld?
The language needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, we could add more specific language to address that concern.
That would be to GC or GCA, Mr. Verney?
I would say GCA.
Okay. And so we would just add some sort of language that says if the position is listed on the organizational chart, then it'll need board approval.
Right.
Thank you.
Something along those lines.
But if there was a situation where we would go and make changes to the organization chart, where board would not have to approve certain position, how would we go about reorganizing or rewriting the organization chart so that it can be avoided? We talked about, I talked about it prior to. I didn't have the chance to research like I wanted to.
Yeah.
Like, say, for example, Jessica has her secretary, but she wanted to change her title from like an executive secretary, just in general. We're changing the title. What would we would have to get approval? Would they have to get approval from the board?
That'd be the safe, I mean, the options would be at most approval, but there sometimes we take the position the board doesn't have to approve it, but you need to provide the board notice of it prior to doing it, so the board is at least aware of it in case anybody has a concern. So I mean, I think those would be the two possibilities. But what you would not want to happen is just to do it and not ask for board approval or inform the board and have the board find out later on.
Okay.
Any other questions? Comments? Policy GCD, professional staff, vacation and holidays. Ms. Jessica, that's you with it.
Well,
I think we're going to tag team it.
yeah, we're going to tag team this one.
And let me start just by saying,
Yeah.
we left two things. One, the thought process here is, as I understand it currently, employees do not have the ability to accumulate any leave time. So it's one of those, use it or lose it. If they do not use it, then they don't have the ability to carry over any annual leave from year to year. There are some districts that allow employees to carry over some annual leave, but they have some number that's capped on. So you can't accumulate 100 days or whatever, some ridiculous number of days, but you can accumulate 10, 20 days, et cetera. And then once you get beyond that, it's understanding that you would not continue to accumulate it. So the question would be, one, if you want to do that. Two, what would the number be? And then a lot of districts that have that type of policy also have a policy or have a sentence about what to do with those days once the employee is separated from the district. So they might say, for example, if the cap is 20 days, we will pay you for 20 days of leave upon separation from employment. And sometimes they do it at the daily rate of pay. Sometimes they will do it at a substitute rate of pay. But again, that's all for discussion. One is their interest in allowing employees to accumulate some leave days with the understanding there's going to be some cap. And then two, what to do about the employee separation. I know Jessica and I were talking on the way here. One thing we have not done is we've not done any sort of fiscal impact study to say this is what we think this is what we project this would cost if we were to make this policy revision. And I think that's a conversation that the board probably need to have with the administration as well.
Right. That's my only concern. I think that, it's great that if we can, allow our employees to carry over a few of their annual leave days, I think it would go a long way, being that, we have a staff shortage and, we're trying to get our employees to stay with us. So we've got to extend an olive branch somehow. But I really feel like, we need to study this with our finance department just to see what impact it would, incur upon the district financially, as far as how many days like it says, unused annual leave in excess of blank days will be lost. And the days carried forward would be lost if it's not used within 12 months. But before we can fill those blanks in, I think we need to get some input from the finance department. And Ms. Barrett's not here today, but that is a conversation that I will have with her. I do believe we need to do something and allow our staff, because, sometimes you may not be able to, for unforeseen circumstances, be able to utilize your annual leave days by June 30th. So I will have that conversation.
I think it would be a good idea if they can carry over, because you don't know what's coming in the future for them, So I feel that it could be like a medical procedure or something that is coming up and they need to save time, but they're not going to do it this year because it's too much and they don't have enough time, but that they can accrue time and wait. I think it's a good idea. Where I work, we are able to do that, and under certain circumstances, we are able to, like, if I have a death in my family or I have a family illness and I needed to stay home, there are staff that will be able to, or employees will be able to donate hours to me, so I can get through the hump that I'm going through. But, yeah, it's a separate, yeah, but it's the PTO. They won't let us do the EIH. It will only be the PTO that we can donate. So I think it's worth looking into if it's not going to cost the district too much to do it.
Do we have a problem with employees taking off the days before a holiday?
But there's a policy that specifically talks about that. I don't know the policy off the top of my head, but there is a policy that addresses it.
Okay, we need to look at
Look
that.
at that one.
I guess look at both and see how we can work through it. Darryl?
I actually have a couple of comments on this policy. And the first one, I consider myself to be very fiscally conservative, which I'm afraid may raise its head tomorrow at our meeting. But I do think somehow we need to find a way, not only for retention purposes and recruitment purposes, but also as a loyalty bonus, maybe, that we can even put in language that says after X number of years you can carry over, or maybe we find a way to add additional vacation time after a certain number of years. I really think as a district we need to figure, and I'm all about having the financial impact study to see, but I think we need to allow employees to take days over. I think we should try to look at some sort of way to maybe increase that for our employees who have been here for a certain length of time. And then the last part, right before holidays, that says no more than 5 consecutive days of annual leave can be taken in a period or whatever. I know that, I'm pretty sure that was just added last year, and I think we need to look at that in the policy, because just from my vantage point for working in this district as in IT, and now in the district that I work in that same position, there are times during the year that we're not allowed to take off. Beginning of school, testing, those times where we know technology issues are going to be critical, our departments were never allowed to take off those times. So it really shrinks the availability of when you can take off. So in both circumstances, at Colleton and in the district I'm at now, a lot of time the technology department would save their vacation until the end of June, when it was the slowest time of the year as far as technology needs, and then take our vacation. And whenever you limit that to how many days you can take in that 10-day period, it really limits those people who, in order to be a good employee and to be responsible to the district, can't take at other times throughout the year whenever other people can. So I really wish we would look at that. And, I mean, because it's got to come down to being approved by the supervisor or by the superintendent anyway. So I'm not sure why we have that language in there that says that those things can't happen whenever you're punishing employees who are just trying to do the right thing and be at work in those critical times. Even this year with Miss Jessica, she lost time because she refused to take off because there was so much to do. And I don't think we should punish our employees for that. Now, if there's someone who's trying to take 2 consecutive weeks in the middle of the academic calendar or something, that's different. But I really think we kind of need to look at this and be a little bit more flexible with it for our employees.
Well, can't the superintendent sign off on if someone needs to be off, or are we jumping the gun on that?
Well, according to the language that's in this policy that I'm pretty sure was put in last year, it says no more than 5 days can be taken. It says without the approval of the superintendent, but you're talking about now your immediate supervisor can't even say, yeah, this is a slow time, so it's okay if you do that. We're talking about going all the way up to the superintendent, where I'm just not sure that that's necessary.
Well, we come all the way up to the board for certain things, so I don't see the difference.
Yeah, but you don't want to do that on something that is as meaningless as this. Our superintendent has enough to worry about as it is now. Why put more on her plate that the supervisors can handle at their positions?
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, I think the reason why that was put in there is because sometimes, like you said, Mr. Irwin, employees are needed certain times of the year. Like, we don't need employees to take off, when school is about to get started, or sometimes in the summer when we're preparing. And I think this would only apply to 240-day employees anyway, and I don't think we have a lot of 240-day employees in the district. I'm not sure about what that number is. So, and I truly understand your concern, but I'm not asking for more work, but I'm thinking that in this instance, the way it's written will probably take care of what you're saying, because they would have to get that approval. Because, I'm just thinking about just operating and getting
Sure.
ready for school, and you may need certain people, and, as superintendent, you may have to deny that and say, no, maybe you can take that another time.
Sure.
I don't know. I just think that the way it's written, I don't know what you think, Bernie.
Just trying to take some work off of you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. But I think in that particular instance, I would need to know who is taking off and who's not going to be there,
Right.
At least you're keeping
what do you-
on track. You're keeping track.
Yeah.
I suspect as a practical matter, it might start out with the employee going to their immediate supervisor, and probably the immediate supervisor will then come to you, is kind of what I think.
Yes, and that is the process, because I've had, one already, and the immediate supervisor, came to me and said that this employee is requesting this, and then, I would approve it or deny it.
Sure, and
Yeah.
that was kind of my point, that we just leave that at the immediacy, the immediate level with the supervisor, so every one of those doesn't come to you. For instance, my supervisor in IT, no offense to the superintendent, but my direct supervisor in IT knows whether or not I'm needed in the school
Right,
whenever
right.
the
I understand.
superintendent may not, right?
I
The
got you.
superintendent may not know that we have to do re-imaging of all the laptops next week, so she may approve it, whereas the supervisor knows, hey, no, this is a big job, we need all hands on deck, we really don't need them. That's my
Right,
thing.
and I understand that makes good sense. And
But-
maybe we could change the language to say that they go through the supervisor, and making sure that the superintendent is aware, or something of that nature. I don't know.
But I also think it's good that it does come to you, for the simple fact that the immediate supervisor, it could develop some, like, more of a personal issues with some of the staff, because it's like, oh, whenever this one comes, she always get the time. So if it's coming through you and there is any questions, then you can communicate with the direct supervisor and say,
Yeah.
hey,
Or we can say that it comes to me through the immediate supervisor, because I think the immediate supervisor needs to know. Yeah, they need to know.
I think we make that tweak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Dr. Batty?
If I could just say, I believe that most of the 240 employees, a lightning bolt just went right over your heads out there. I was just going to say that most of the 240 employees, to my knowledge, report directly to Mrs. Williams anyway, because it's really mainly the council. So there wouldn't really be a time when a member of your council would take more than a week off without your knowledge and approval.
Yeah.
That's not true
Well,
because the
there are
entire
few.
IT department is 240.
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah,
I didn't
and there are
know
a
that.
few more that are, 240. Because there are a few,
really?
like in CNI, that are
Hey,
240.
I
yeah.
retract that from the record.
You tried.
How about our retired employees? We don't let them carry over, time, do we? Come on.
Mr. Vernon, I wasn't trying to steal your thunder. It looked like you were about to respond. When they retire, when they retire and separate, they get paid. When they retire, they get paid for the days that they had accumulated. So we don't want to, what we call double dip, and give them additional days. However, if that's something that the board wants to discuss and decide on, then we'll do, whatever the board decides.
Ms. Hamilton,
So y'all do pay retired employees one separate, I didn't know that.
we paid them for vacation days or sick days?
So they can take up to 90 days. So if they have 90 days accumulated, then the state will pay them. Retired, he said retired.
Right. And then our district would pay them if they had vacation time? No, it's only sick time?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll pay them for all 90 days?
Right.
Okay.
You're asking, and we give them, if they recycle their days. Some of them come back and say, can I get my days back?
Right.
I can't give you your days back because you already paid out.
Gotcha.
Out the
Gotcha.
retirement system for those days.
Gotcha.
You understand what I'm saying? Is that good?
Yes.
I do, and I just want to also note, Ms. Williams, you said that this mostly, this is 240-day employees. I don't want to misspeak, but I think, are there 240-day employees that need subs? We don't have 240 days that need subs, right? So just
No.
as far as a financial matter, you're not double paying, right? If I take a vacation day, you're paying me for my vacation day, but you're not also paying a sub
No.
to work for me because 240 people don't have that. So just
Yep, you're
as we
right.
think about the financial impact, we need to keep that in mind as well, that 240-day people don't need subs.
Right, thank you for that.
Get me straight on that. You lost me on that one.
Well,
No, go ahead.
well, what he's saying is, I was talking about, making sure that there's no fiscal impact to carrying over these days. And what he's saying is 240-day employees do not have substitutes, so we don't have to pay anything extra if they took vacation days.
Teachers not 240? Oh,
no.
okay. 190.
Impact that we may need to consider is the operational impact of the vacation days. The operational impact, because last summer, I do remember there being we weren't operational. There were 3 departments that were that were gone for 2 weeks consecutively, and it made it hard for the district to continue functioning.
And again, I think our superintendent, in communication with those supervisors, I think would eliminate that. And then those supervisors would know, hey, we can't all be gone, only half or a third or whatever, because superintendent says summer school's ending and someone needs to be here or whatever.
Yeah, and it would go back to, just being very mindful of how we approve prior approvals during that time as well, because I know what Ms. Hamilton's referring to, like last summer, 1 week we were at SCAZA, and then the next week we were at Model Schools Conference, and it was like two full weeks that, some of us were not here. all well worth it, but I guess we just need to make sure that we're doing due diligence to make sure that we're not sending everybody out at one time. Yeah.
But I do think we need to, in this policy, we need to figure out how to allow our staff to take days over, whatever that number may be. And we need to, I would prefer to allow them to take days over to be used. Even this line about, days for will be lost if not used within 12 months of accrual, right? So if we said unused annual leave in excess of 10 days would be lost, so we let them take over 10 days, but 5 of those days they have to use within that next year or they lose them, you know what I mean?
Right,
But,
right.
and then for me, and I'm sure this would not be popular for people who are thinking about retiring or leaving, I would even be fine with taking out the last sentence about compensating them upon separation if we gave them the ability to use their vacation within the time that they are employed with the district. I just think that could be a really good retention and recruitment tool for our 240 employees.
But you're not, it's a cum from from July to June, right?
Say that again?
It's a, you get it, you,
July, yeah, to June.
okay? And so, when would your slow time would be? I'm just asking a question.
Again, so it would depend on the department, right?
Well-
You wouldn't want buildings and ground gone in the spring and summer months whenever you've got landscaping and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
But then again, for IT, the slowest time of the year, if there is one, would be that last part of June after school is out before you start preparing for the other. So, I mean, it would depend on a department by department thing. And that's why I say, and again, no offense, but I think the superintendent would not know all of the ins and outs of each department as well as the supervisor. So I appreciate the language of saying go through the supervisor to the superintendent, just to make sure that, again, our superintendent may say, you've worked really hard this year. Yes, you can have 2 weeks off in the middle of May for an IT person, and that would be a great and wonderful thing, except that's right in the middle of testing when you need every single IT person plus about 10, right?
But communications, that's,
I agree.
that'll take care of that.
Yeah, I think we can put some language in to address that.
Okay.
As far as I know, that's the last one. Anybody?
Can I ask one quick question?
Yes.
And I'm not wanting to prolong, because I probably have the longest drive to get home. So, as far as the piece about compensation for unused vacation time, at separation, is there any sort of general consensus about, is that language we want to keep, or is that language, does it depend on, I guess, what the fiscal impact says, or kind of where are y'all as far as that language?
So I wonder, just as I'm sitting here thinking about it from a physical impact part, right? If I decide that at the end of June of this year, I'm leaving, I'm separating from the district. If you say you're not going to pay me for my vacation time when I leave, then I'm going to make sure I use all of my vacation time before I leave. Whereas if you say you will pay me, then I will stay and work and then get paid on the back end of it. So I just think that's, either way you're going to pay for it. So,
I'll take that another step. I know even in districts where there is a cap, right? So let's say your cap is we won't pay you for any more than 45 days. My experience has been employees that typically will get down to that 45.
Sure.
That last year when they know they're going to retire, they go, well, I'm not going to get paid for it.
Right.
I've accumulated it, so I might as well use it. So I mean, that's another.
And
I'm
I
not saying
think,
that on behalf of my wife who retired a couple years ago. I'm not saying she did that. I'm just saying in general, some people might do that.
I think the district that I'm currently employed at, I think is 45 days. And y'all, we have not, to my knowledge, not in the recent past, we haven't paid any at all upon separation, right? So even if we said, because we're a generous administration and board, and we said, we'll pay you for 5 days, it's still better than what they had now without us getting into this. I don't think we need to handcuff our district and say, we'll pay you 45 days after you're gone. But if we said 5 or 10 or whatever, I think that would be a nice gesture to our employees. And again, I'm not sure the legal ramifications of this, but I wouldn't be against saying after you've been employed for 5 years or 10 years, then we'll do this for you, just kind of as a reward for longevity in the district.
So I'm going to speak on behalf of the non-cabinet employees. I don't think that holding them till after you've been here for 5 years, that would not be attractive to me coming in. If I know I could cross the county line and go to where you work, and they're going to pay me 45 days, regardless of how long I've been with the district.
Sure, yeah, my point in that, Ms.
recruiting.
McDonald, was not so much for the recruitment part, but for the retention part of that, just for our employees who have, I think I would have Ms. Hamilton's approval in saying the more we can do to keep our employees, the better off we would be. So just looking for those little kind of nuggets that we can throw out there to say, hey, stick with us, stick through some of the difficult times, and we'll reward you on the back end.
Yeah, and I'm thinking for when you have employees who have the options of a shorter drive or staying here versus going out of the county. Right now, we need to be as competitive as possible for all positions. That's my opinion. So something as small as that could matter to people when they're looking at where do I want my last job to be before retirement? Where do I want to spend the next 10 years while my children are in this district? I want to stay with them. So that could be the difference, just my opinion.
Yeah. Most definitely. Because I know I was talking to an employee and, they're in a district that pays a travel stipend. If they live, a certain amount of miles away from the district pays a travel stipend. So, anything we can do to retain our employees, I think, like everybody's saying, we need to, do some things for our employees to encourage them to stay with us.
So maybe we need to check out other districts and see what their options are and try to be as competitive as possible, just as long as we're taking care of our employees.
Yeah, I already looked at some of that, but we can look at some more, yeah.
So let me just say real quick, I disagree with that. Now, I wasn't going to say anything until I heard Mr. Verney say we'll look into that. If we start trying to compare ourselves to other districts, we're going to be in trouble. So I really think we need to get creative and offer up ways that other districts aren't offering. That way we can stand out a little bit. If we start trying to do what every other district, listen, our district cannot afford, like our neighboring district, to pay people 45 days of vacation whenever they leave. We can't afford that. So I don't think we need to do what other districts are doing. I think we need to look at ways that we, within the confines of what we have and what we're doing here, how can we manage little things here and there to say, thank you for staying with us, or thank you for coming to be a part of us, or those kind of, and it's going to require us to be creative simply because we don't have the kind of funds that other districts have. I think Berkeley, if I'm not mistaken, is given like a $5,000 bonus to every employee this year. That's not feasible for us. So we can't worry about, oh, well, Berkeley's doing this, so we need to do this, because we're going to lose that every time.
Well, we can also, by looking at what other people are doing, we'll know what we can and cannot do. But we won't know unless we know what they're doing. We just want to be competitive if we can, but we won't know that unless we see what everybody else doing. So we have to make some kind of arrangement to see what's going on in order to know where we can get to. I think all hearts are clear. As far as anything else, Mr. Bernie? No. Miss Jessica? Members?